History and Culture podcasts are a production of PCN, a nonprofit television network. Listeners like you make our programming possible. To learn more about PCN's mission and to support PCN with a donation, visit pcntv.com. This link and others can be found in our show notes. We appreciate your support.
Welcome to PCN's History and Culture podcast. I'm Phil Beckman. This podcast series features interviews exploring Pennsylvania's rich history from the colonial era to industrialization, the Gettysburg Campaign to sports history, and from art to politics and more.
Today we are joined by Larry Boehm, president of the Leechburg Area Museum. Today, Peter Besharo's paintings appear in collections at institutions like the Smithsonian and the American Folk Art Museum. But during Peter's lifetime, how well recognized was he as an artist in Leechburg, Pennsylvania?
During Peter's lifetime in Leechburg, he was not recognized as an artist at all. He had been a house and sign painter, and he was known to paint, but the content and the quality of his artwork really wasn't known to the people in town.
Well, before we talk about his legacy today and kind of how he became well known, let's talk about his early life. He wasn't always from Leechburg, so where did he grow up?
Peter Besharo was born in Syria in 1899 during the waning years of the Ottoman Empire. He was believed to have been raised in either Mount Lebanon or the city of Kafargzina, if I'm saying that correctly.
What do we know about his journey from Syria to the United States?
From the records that are available, Peter had departed Syria alone at the age of 13 and brought to America. It's believed that he did so to escape military conscription under the Ottoman Empire. Peter spoke very little English when he arrived at Ellis Island, and it was there that his name was actually Americanized to just Peter Charlie.
Was Leechburg a common place for immigrants from the Middle East in the early 1900s?
No, not at all. The early 20th century Leechburg was experiencing a rapid population growth as a result of its expanding coal and steel industries. And those industries had attracted hundreds of Italian, Hungarian, German, Welsh, Irish immigrants, etc. But Middle Eastern descent was very uncommon in the area. Some of his relatives believe that he came to the area because he did have an uncle that lived in Pittsburgh.
Did Peter's immigrant experience shape his work ethic or his worldview?
I would say it did. Peter arrived in America. He spoke very little English, and he had almost no support structure in this country. So survival was the most likely driver of his work ethic. During his lifetime, he seems to also have made the most of his religious freedom, and that's evident in his artwork, which just demonstrates a knowledge of a number of different faiths. He embraced his work opportunity as well as was a self-employed, self-motivated person in a number of fields. He was an active member of his community. He was involved in a lot of veteran support, town celebrations. And despite his love of his new home, Peter was actually still very proud of his Syrian heritage. And in June of 24, he petitioned to have his name legally changed back to Peter Addy Besharo. He was claiming that he was falsely led to believe that Charlie was the proper English translation of Besharo, which it really wasn't. The accounts given by those people that knew Peter in Leechburg indicate that he was accepted and well-liked by the people of town, although he was described as a character that was not particularly engaging and maybe a little bit odd. Many people recall Peter as being kind of a carefree, happy-go-lucky sort of guy, but his artwork doesn't demonstrate that outward appearance. It's more indicative that he was deeply scarred by the war that he had fled and by the wars that he experienced here in America.
So when he first comes to Leechburg, what did he do for work?
When Peter lived here or first arrived here, he had arrived in a rapidly expanding industrial center. He had dozens of labor opportunities in the mills, the mines, and the distillery, but he didn't take any interest in any of that. He actually got a job in a local haberdashery as an assistant.
And he later goes on to open his own tailoring business. Was this a successful business for him?
It was. Peter opened his tailoring business in around 1924. He had worked in the haberdashery for a number of years, and then between the haberdashery and the tailoring shop, he had been a traveling merchant at the coal camps. He would go from coal mine camp to coal mine camp and peddle wares to the workers at those camps. And after doing that, he had earned enough money to open up his own tailoring shop, a skill he likely learned working at the haberdashery. The business was very successful. He was able to keep it going through the Great Depression by offering discounts to repeat customers. And during World War II, he was able to maintain that business and actually was known to take his sample materials and send them home to his relatives in Michigan and up in New Hampshire so that they could make blankets out of them.
And eventually Peter closes that tailoring business. What's his next venture?
He does. He closes the tailoring business after World War II. We're not exactly sure when, and we're not exactly sure why. But his last ad in the local paper for the tailor shop was in 1946. And the first reference we can find to him as a house and sign painter appears in 1948. Now, in that article, he is credited with having been the painter of the facade of the First National Bank of Leechburg. And the article refers to him as the poor man's Michelangelo. And we think that that nickname was given to him in 1947 when he had painted the interior walls of Leechburg St. Catherine's Church with images of Christianity. So we know he was actively painting around the time the tailoring shop closed, but we don't know really when he started or what made him decide to change from tailor shop to house and sign painter. There was probably a lot of commercial pressure on Peter at that time with the town expanding in the post-World War II era. There were a number of shops opening up that were selling mass-produced clothes. That might have been a factor, or it's possible that after 2 decades of running his own business that he just wanted to change the scenery.
And during his house and sign painting, he rents a garage behind a hardware store. What's he doing with this garage?
The garage that Peter rented on Diamond Avenue was originally leased as a place to store his equipment for the house and sign painting business. He also used that space to paint signage. Several residents that we interviewed recalled having seen Peter in that garage, but none of them was ever aware of what he was doing or working on, or that he was painting beyond, customer order.
Do you think that his house and sign painting kind of led him to get into painting on his own?
Yeah, I would say it did. As a house and sign painter, he would have had a lot of practice painting with household oils, obviously. And as a painter of house and sign, he has to control the flow and the leveling of the paint, maintain scale and composition. I'm sure that his interest in art and his business as a sign painter are, kind of fed off of each other with practice and inspiration.
Do we know if anybody was teaching him how to paint or how to do his art?
No, Peter was entirely self-taught, and he's actually considered in the art community as one of the masters of self-taught art.
What materials does he use for his paintings?
Not surprisingly, Peter worked almost entirely with household oil paint. His business would have afforded him an ample supply of leftover paint, the cost of which was probably covered by his clients. He would use those paints and really painted on scraps of wood, paper, cardboard, and occasionally canvas.
And his paintings, as you can see, there's 2 behind you, they're very unique. How would you describe his style?
The art world would describe Peter's style as folk art, though he didn't really paint the traditional subject matter. When you think Peter Charlie Besharo, you don't want to think Grandma Moses. The subject matter is very different. He had a preference for deep colors. His palette was saturated with earth tones like brown, yellow, rust, and green, as well as black and white, and he often punctuated his images with deep reds and blues.
Were there any recurring themes or symbols in his paintings?
There were quite a few, actually. He blended a number of characters. Many of his works featured spirits, angels, demons, biblical characters, aliens. The Statue of Liberty, and even Abraham Lincoln makes a few appearances. It's an odd cast of characters, but it's never put together for comedic effect. There's usually a message in it, and there's a number of themes that repeat. I would say Christianity is a strong one, but there are also a lot of symbols of Eastern mysticism, and Armenian folk motifs appear routinely as well. He blends those in his paintings with Christianity, space exploration, and American history. It's kind of there's a lot going on in a Besharo painting.
Was Peter religious? I know you mentioned that he painted the inside of one of the churches. And then how does his religion kind of play into his art?
Peter was very religious, and there's a lot of evidence in his paintings that after arriving in America that he used that religious freedom to explore a number of faiths. Now, here in Leechburg, he was Catholic. He was a member of the St. Catherine's Church, and the images often reflect a lot of biblical theme, Old Testament and New, and the apocalypse seem to be one of his favorite subjects.
He often has Eve as a character in his paintings. How did he paint her?
You know, in a very folk art way. The proportions are usually off, features are usually exaggerated.
And another symbol that I picked out very easily when looking at his paintings were the shape of an eye, and it's called the all-seeing eye. He has two paintings. One of them is titled All-Seeing Eye, and the other one is the double all-seeing eye. What is this eye?
The all-seeing eye is emblematic of God's constant watch and care for the earth. Peter uses it in numerous paintings, and not always the same way. In the double all-seeing eye, like you said, it has two pupils. In the Lady Liberty painting that's in the Smithsonian in Washington, the all-seeing eye replaces the Statue of Liberty's breasts. Some paintings have as many as 3 or 4 all-seeing eyes, and many of them just have it centered at the top, watching the scene that Peter is depicting. It's hard to say why it's always there, but I believe that Peter believes that everything transpired under the watchful eye of God.
And you mentioned that this all-seeing eye is kind of watching over the earth, and one of his paintings is titled "This Planet: A House of Loss." What do we know about this painting?
I'd be lying if I told you I could fully interpret that painting or any of his others, but I think partly because my knowledge of Syria and Peter's ethnic origins just isn't sufficient for that task. But still, there's some of what he's trying to convey is very apparent. In the painting, Peter depicts what are either 2 planets in orbit around the sun or the Earth and the moon in orbit around the sun. And it is shown from 2 perspectives, one east-west, one north-south. And the intersection of those orbits is marked on the painting. I'm not really sure what he's saying there, but the script on the bottom is pretty apparent what message he's trying to convey. On the bottom of that painting, he scribes, "For past 5,000 years ago, this planet, a house of loss." And pest 5000 refers to the 1894 discovery of Yersinia pestis, which is the bacteria responsible for the Black Death. And house of loss refers to what we believe is the 12th house in astrology, which is the end of the zodiac cycle. The 12th house typically represents man's separation from the material world when we shed our need for possessions and begin our existence as spiritual beings. There is further support for that in the last line of the painting that reads, "Money not higher than human life and health," where he's basically trying to describe the transcendence from physical material beings to spiritual.
You mentioned there being text, numbers, dates. Where do we see that across his work? Is it used often, and how does that kind of impact the viewer?
It's used very often. And, before I even get into that, you might notice in House of Loss and a number of other paintings, there are many misspellings. And that's due to the fact that Peter learned his English when he arrived in America on his own. And the misspellings had led a lot of his art critics to think that he was uneducated. But in truth, Peter was actually very intelligent. It's just that English was his second language. And around town, it's actually even known that the signs that he would paint for his clients sometimes also contained misspellings. Now, when you want to get into the scripts and the text on the paintings, many of them are dates. Some of them are biblical references. A lot of the dates coincide with the beginnings and ends of wars or empires and other such things. And they're very important to trying to understand what he's talking about, because if you're familiar with the current events of those years, it helps you to really understand what the image is driving towards.
Did Peter ever discuss the meaning or purpose behind some of his paintings with family, friends, or the community of Leechburg?
He did not. It's interesting. Peter, he was known that he was an artist in town. There were many people that knew he painted. The town doctor knew he painted. His family knew that he painted, and he had shared paintings with those people. But when we conducted the interviews, and some of the interviews that were conducted by the Rosenack family when they were investigating him for a book that they published on him in the 1990s, it was found that the paintings that he shared with people in town were usually just basic astronomy or simple landscapes. He never seems to have shown any of his deeper subject matter to anybody that he knew.
In 1960, Peter passes away. What happens with the rest of his paintings that he leaves behind?
Okay, so after Peter Besharo dies in 1960, he doesn't have any relatives or next of kin in the Leechburg or Pittsburgh area. So the owner of the garage made contact with Peter's sister Betty in Detroit, Michigan, and he offered to arrange to have Peter's belongings boxed and shipped to her at her expense. But Betty assumed that there was nothing in the garage beyond Peter's paints, brushes, ladders, drop cloths, and a little bit of his amateur artwork. So she had advised the landlord to dispose of them as he saw fit. The garage owner didn't think that was the appropriate answer, so he contacted Peter's cousin in New Hampshire, and he extended the same offer, and he received the same response. So when he entered the garage, to him, it had become evident that Peter was more than a painter of just signs and buildings. There were 69 works of art stacked in the garage, and it was clear to the owner that these works might be of interest to the art community. The garage owner's name, unfortunately, has been lost to history, but I do consider him sort of an unsung hero in Peter's story. Now, over the next few years, he presented the paintings to various collectors in search of a buyer, and eventually he found one in Chicago when Phyllis Kind expressed interest in the collection. We don't know what the sale amount was. All we know is that when Phyllis Kind opened the Phyllis Kind Gallery in Chicago, Illinois in 1967, most of the work on display was Peter Charlie Besharo's.
Do you think that the Leechburg community knew about him and his paintings once they were finally revealed in the garage?
There was probably a little bit of rumbling around town about it, but the artwork is sort of odd, and when you ask the everyman, what is good art, you get sort of a generic answer, and Peter's art was odd, and they really didn't see the significance of it at the time. So really, after the artwork got sold to Phyllis Kind, the story kind of disappeared from the local vernacular. It just kind of fell.
Do you think Peter Besharo's story was at risk of being forgotten?
Yeah, it absolutely was. I had been on the board of directors at the Leechburg Museum for probably 7 years and had never heard his name, never seen a painting, never found a newspaper article. There just wasn't any information on him preserved here. And again, I think that's because Peter had achieved that fame posthumously and outside of the local area. He was gaining attention in Chicago, New York, Washington, D.C., and that information wasn't reaching Leechburg. Nobody here really knew it. Fortunately, we had an art teacher named Patty Yarko who had told the story to some of her students in art class at the Leechburg Area High School. And a gentleman named Corey Bollinger had recalled that story and brought it to our attention and asked if we had ever looked into it, to which we all had to confess that we hadn't. We weren't aware of him. Of course, upon looking into him, we were immediately intrigued and began to investigate him further. And as far as to go, that board of director member Elizabeth Smale went on and contacted every living relative and everyone that she could find that might have known him, and conducted extensive interviews to see what people remembered about him, and really to bring that story to light and put it back in as much information as we could collect on him in one place.
And over Peter's lifetime, he created 69 paintings. Where are some of them now, and do we know what his artwork is currently valued at?
Yeah, we do. We know where a fair number of them are, not all of them. After the closure of the Phyllis Kine Gallery, a lot of the artwork was sold off, and a lot of it went to private auction. A number of pieces have sold at Christie's in New York and the Tijan in Paris. So many of them are in the hands of private collectors now. Some of them are in Europe, and we know one of them is in Australia. But many have been retained here in the States. We know that 3 of his paintings, to include Lady Liberty of 1953 to 1962, From Earth to Haven, From Haven to Earth, and The Police of Planet Jupiter, which is one of my favorites, are all in the collection of the Smithsonian American Art Museum in Washington, D.C. The Minneapolis Institute of Art in Minneapolis had acquired a painting titled 1902, 1903, 1904, 1909, 1911 from the Karen Lennox Gallery in Chicago. The American Folk Art Museum currently has the Double All-Seeing Eye and the Crusade of Noah. The Kevin Morris Gallery in New York has Wars in Summer of 1904. The Fleischer Ullman Gallery has 4 of his paintings, to include Savage Gina, another one of my favorites. And the Philadelphia Art Museum has The Face of Our Old Time Moon. There's a number of other galleries that I know of that have paintings, and I try to keep track of where they are, but they do get moved around a good bit for exhibition, and they are still featured pretty often. I know Smithsonian has the Lady Liberty of 53 to 62 on display right now.
You just listed a ton of his artwork. Is he creating the title of every painting? Did he do that?
He did not. None of Peter's paintings were titled by Peter. And since they were never presented by Peter publicly, the paintings have received their titles usually based on text that you'll see scribed into the painting. It's whatever text might relate most to the main theme of the image.
What does it mean for Leechburg to have a local artist recognized at the national level?
That's very important to us. Really, Leechburg is steeped in industrial history. We're known for tin and steel and stainless steel and coal and spirits to a degree. And when people think of Leechburg, they think of Western Pennsylvania industry. We've had plenty of successful artists and musicians that have come out of here, but none of them have achieved the level of status in the community that Peter Charlie Besharo did.
What message do you hope future generations take from looking at Peter Besharo's life and his artwork?
That's easy. It's very easy when you think about it. And I think you want to paint or perform or be like Peter Besharo. I think what makes Peter's artwork so authentic is that Peter never intended to share it. He didn't paint these images because he was trying to make a name for himself. He didn't paint these industries because he was concerned about how they would perform in a marketplace. He painted what he felt or saw or wanted to convey on that canvas for himself. And having done that in the privacy of his own garage without any intention to ever sell those paintings, we know that they're authentic. Those are a glimpse into the mind of an artist. So I think that when you're trying to do anything in life, don't respond to the market. Respond to what you believe. Respond to what you believe is going to work. Paint your own way, or do your own thing.
And then lastly, I just want to ask Larry, what is your favorite painting that Peter Besharo painted and why?
Um, that's a fairly difficult question, really. I've seen very few paintings from Peter that don't interest me. Many of his simple astronomy paintings, they're not that interesting because he's basically modeling the solar system and sometimes calculating distance between planets, or in some cases when the Earth will run out of oxygen. Hopefully he's got that one wrong. But I think that you have to break the paintings down into a few categories, and simple astronomy is one good category. Religious themes is another, and then you've got some landscape work that he did, but some of them are content driven and some of them are composition driven. And some of them, like Angel's Power, visually is incredibly striking, but the painting itself is very simple. So it's not really my favorite. And then others, are just content. And I think where he combines content and composition to the best of his ability is Lady Liberty of 1953 to 1962. The messages in the painting are fairly clear. The images are very striking. The colors sort of jump out at you. There's a lot of contrast and a lot of information in there of what he believes is the future of America, or maybe the future. So I think that, that would probably be my favorite.
We've been speaking with Larry Boehm, president of the Leechburg Area Museum. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Listeners like you make PCN programming possible. Full episodes of PCN's history and culture content, like the interview you just heard, are available to stream with the PCN Select app. Explore other documentary programs, event coverage, and a lot more. To learn more about PCN's mission and to support PCN with a donation, visit PCNTV.com. This link and others can be found in our show notes. We appreciate your support.